Species.
Welcome to Origin of Species. This is Steve with my good friend Scott. Today we're going to discuss cynicism with special guest, comedian Yannis Pappas of the Long Days with Yannis Pappas podcast. If you're here in the Richmond area, you also have the chance to see Yannis Pappas at the Sandman Comedy Club on September 16th through September 18th. So before we get going today, if you like the show, if you're a fan, if you enjoy the bandanas and the beer, give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Also, if you enjoy the show, patreon.com/Species. Become a Species supporter. You get great content like Species Uncut, in which I'm going to discuss with Scott my vacation to Florida and also how by 5 minutes I missed running into a dead body. And that, Scott, by the way, is actually true. So
Wow.
Thank you all for listening. So today we're going to discuss cynicism. So going to this episode, before I did my research, I would have said I was a cynic. Cynicism is something I think that runs, I don't want to say runs wild in our country, but it's out there. It's a thing. Not sure if I want to be a cynic after I've reviewed the history of that. So we're going to talk about the origin of cynicism, which goes back to the Greeks. And of course, if we're going to have Greece, we're going to have a great guest like Yannis Pappas, who is very Greek in a good way. I said that, Scott, like it sounded like that was a bad thing, but
Yeah.
I think being Greek is a very good thing. So we're
Yeah.
going to discuss
It's
that
better
with
than
him.
being a dirty, was it filthy Italian, pervy Italian?
I believe they prefer sauce monkey, and we'll see. I'm sure that'll come up too with Yannis Pappas. So we'll talk about that and also talk about cynicism in our current time. So before I get going, just want to say, Scott, it's our first episode back after summer. I'm glad to be back with you.
Yeah, man.
Staring at you from my computer to yours. It's been a wonderful summer. We're both very tan. Scott's tan in places you can't see because he likes to be tan very specific areas, but that's a patreon.com/species thing to find out. So we're here and let's talk about cynicism. So what is cynicism? What does it mean to be a cynic? So we're going to go to our friends at dictionary.com. Cynicism, a noun, a person who believes that only selfishness motivates human actions and who disbelieves in or minimizes selfless acts or disinterested points of view. So I guess that is an accurate definition of that, but I didn't find it very illuminating. What I did find illuminating is when you look at the description of cynical. So again, from dictionary.com, cynical, showing contempt for accepted standards of honesty or morality by one's actions, especially by actions that exploit the scruples of others. And with that, bitterly or sneeringly distrustful, contemptuous, or pessimistic.
Wow.
So
This is a lot harsher than, like, I haven't looked up the definition of cynicism or cynical ever. It's, you just have the connotation you grew up with. And I never thought of it as harsh as this sounds. Like, I thought, I'm a little cynical. Oh, I've been around a while. I'm jaded. I'm cynical.
Yeah.
I just thought that meant I question things, but this is actually taking it to a whole nother level.
This is, and we're going to meet some people later during this discussion who really did take it to another level.
Ooh.
So in looking at the definition of cynic, again from dictionary.com, one of a sect of Greek philosophers, 4th century BC, who advocated the doctrines that virtue is the only good, that the essence of virtue is self-control, and that surrender to any external influence is beneath human dignity. Now, there's a reason why I read this part of the definition later, because I think as we see we talk about the Greek philosophers who were the cynics, I think the term cynical is going to be a lot more that idea of having a distrusting or disparaging attitude about the motives of others is going to come more into play. But
if I may ask real quick, so what you're saying there is the cynics proper are this group of Greeks, and I've heard of the cynics referring to them, and you're saying maybe you want to sort of break that apart to where, okay, there's the cynics that really have this outlook. It's almost a philosophy or whatever worldview, but the term doesn't necessarily have to be used in a way that's as austere as that, if that's the right word.
I would say it's almost it reminds me of communism in the sense that you always hear that, you know, communism, people always say communism hasn't been tried.
Right.
And, you know, we've never seen real communism, and of which I disagree. I think when we look at communist countries, we're seeing what happens when you do communism. And I think it's a lot like being a cynic, the idea that, you know, virtue is the only good, that the essence of virtue is self-control. That all sounds pretty good. But we're going to see through one of our big characters today, who I think is going to be someone that's going to stay with us for a while, Diogenes, that cynicism can become extreme and not really be a good thing for anyone. So before we discuss the philosophers of cynics, we'll leave one last part of the definition from dictionary.com. The term cynic derives from the Greek kounikos, meaning dog-like, possibly as a pejorative. And dogs are going to come up a whole lot here very shortly, and it'll make sense.
Well, that's appropriate, because I think if I'm cynical at all, I'm cynical toward dogs, because, you know, we think of them as, like, you and I both have dogs. We talked about our dogs, and I feel like their only true virtue, or their only true thing that they want, is food.
Yes.
And so I'm very cynical if you try to apply any other, you know, human trait to a dog, like, oh, he really loves you or likes you. It's like, no, you smell like beef jerky or something. You smell like pemmican. He's coming towards you. No, I'm not saying that's 100% right, but that's pretty much, when you were talking about cynical, I'm like, I wouldn't call myself a cynic at all, but with dogs. But anyway, I'd like to know where this is going to go with dogs. So.
I think with animals, I would agree with you. And I've realized over the last season, I've kind of gotten away from discussing how much I have a respectful view of bears. Some people would say fear. I'd say a very healthy respect of them. But animals are animals. I think treating people like animals, you know, or you know, just making the worst assumption about animals isn't such a bad thing, especially if it's a bear, which could eat your face. And, you know, I think talking about cynicism too is something that is really important for our times, because there's a lot of things to be cynical about. You know, the last few years, you know, wear a mask, don't wear a mask, and wearing a mask becoming some sort of virtue signal, or not wearing a mask becoming a virtue signal. You know, the CDC 1 month is telling you one thing and then changing its mind a few weeks later. Something else to be cynical about, I think, is the weaponization of identity politics, which is something actually I've become a lot less cynical about, thanks to our guest, Yannis Pappas, who helped me find my identity as a Belgian Mongolian. So we'll hear more about that later in our interview. And finally, you know, just something that I think is almost the fertilizer that has spread the seeds of cynicism, the media. The media, the last few years, has gotten on right side, left side. It's gotten so far away from actually telling the truth, as opposed to, I think, just driving wedges between people, you know, making echo chambers, angering, you know, just giving hate porn for each side of the fence, driving people apart. So,
yeah, you almost have to be, you have to be, I don't know if maybe cynical is the word, but you definitely have to be discerning and question you know, I think you and I have talked about too, and I hope this doesn't get too off topic, but we've talked about, like, how there was a time where you and I would never entertain anything that could be labeled a conspiracy theory, or anything that sort of strayed from the media narrative, or whatever it is that we're in, you know. And now I think I've found myself more and more trying not to go too far to a conspiracy theorist type of way of looking at things, but questioning things more than ever before. And maybe that's becoming a little more cynical because of the times we're in.
Well, I'd say that's more of skepticism.
Okay.
Which is something now, when we hear someone's a skeptic, generally that's used to describe, I think, if someone's religious beliefs. Skeptic seems to be used more often for that. But the idea of just questioning what you know, which was another Greek philosophy, was skepticism. The idea of just, you can't think that you know everything. So, you know, just don't take anything, which again can be another thing that can go extreme. But the idea of just questioning everything that's presented to you, which I don't think is bad. But I think we're going to see here some extremes of that can go. So I'm going to quote a lot here from philosophybasics.com on the cynics. So from, again, philosophybasics.com, cynicism is an ancient Greek ethical doctrine which holds that the purpose of life is to live a life of virtue in agreement with nature. Sounds pretty good. No disagreements with that so far. The founder of cynicism was Antisthenes, who had been one of the more important pupils of Socrates in the early 5th century. He preached a life of poverty, but his teachings also covered language, dialogue, and literature. Again, nothing too bad here. It's kind of building to it. So one of the things they looked at is, what is the purpose of life? And the Cynics defined it as, it is to live a life of virtue in agreement with nature. As part of this means rejecting conventional desires for health, wealth, power, and living a life free of possessions and property. And then we start to see some of the roots here of maybe some seeds that could grow to be a bit extreme. Cynics thought they should live in the full glare of the public's gaze, and be also quite indifferent to the face of any insults they would get from their unconventional behavior. And with that, they believed that they saw their job was to act as the watchdog of humanity and to evangelize and hound people about the error of their ways.
Yeah, that's awful.
We'll speak later with Yannis Pappas about the relationship between nature and the modern age. But Cynics start out pretty well. But then we see somebody who's a very fascinating character who followed Antisthenes and became one of the most important Cynics, Diogenes the Cynic. And we've talked about characters before that we've seen. There's some classic characters we've come across on our show that we would like to know more about, but not necessarily live with them. And Diogenes is definitely one of those guys.
Yeah, he can hang out with was it Marquis of Waterford?
Yes, now that would be a pair. I would watch that show on Hulu. Right. I would pay a subscription for that. Yeah. So Diogenes of Sinope, also known as Diogenes the Cynic, was a Greek philosopher of the Socratic period. He's one of the founders of the school of Cynicism. He lived as a beggar in the streets of Athens and made a virtue of extreme poverty. He taught contempt for all human achievements, social values, and institutions. But his sharp wit and stinging satire was very effective in highlighting the decadence, irrationality, and double standards of the Athens society. So this guy sounds like a guy that's on Twitter.
Yeah, it sounds awful.
And that's never a good thing. And again, this is from philosophybasics.com. So continuing with Diogenes, some highlights of him. And also something very important to note, a lot of things that we know about him come in the form of anecdotes. So I'd say take them with a grain of salt. But this is a character, again, that will stay with you for a while. So we talked about him maybe being a Twitter user or activist. Technology obviously wasn't then in 400 BC. Even if it was, he probably wouldn't have access to it because he lived as a beggar in the streets of Athens, living semi-naked in a tub by the temple of Cimabelli, making a virtue of his extreme poverty. And we'll share some artwork on our social media at Species at Instagram and Twitter, where you can see some artwork representing the wine tub that Diogenes lives in.
It sounds like his whole thing probably started as somebody wanted him to take a bath or something, and he's like, not only will I not take a bath, you're all going to smell me, and I'm better than you.
Oh yeah, and you're going to smell lots of things about him. So gosh. some of the things that he's known for, and again, these are anecdotes. I would take them all with a grain of salt. He was known to carry a lamp in daylight and to shine it in people's faces, saying that he was looking for an honest man. So again, kind of funny, but also kind of obnoxious.
If he really did that, somebody needs to punch him in the face.
Yeah,
but I would say that I could see that being apocryphal. But
yeah, he did not like Plato's characterization of man as a featherless biped. So he one time took a chicken, pulled all the feathers off, and walked into a lecture room saying, "Behold, I have found a man." Did not make him very popular with some of his fellow cynics. He also used to have one possession, a single wooden bowl. However, after seeing a peasant boy drink from the hollow of his hands, he got rid of that bowl. He
Good.
thought he learned a lesson from.
He was slipping. He was slipping there.
He was, and
have a bowl.
And this also helped him transition to his love of dogs. So we talked about dog-like earlier being a description of cynics and not being a very good, or it was a pejorative term way it was used.
Yeah.
So one of the things he liked about dogs is they would perform natural bodily functions in public without an issue.
Right.
And he really took that and I think ran with it. He ate food in the marketplace, which was seen as kind of a bad thing to like eat in the street and eat in the marketplace.
Right.
But then he took it up a notch. He would masturbate in the marketplace. He would urinate on those who insulted him. He would defecate in the theater, and he would point at people who scolded him with his middle finger.
Wow. This guy, the balls on this guy, and everybody get to see the balls on this guy.
Everyone was very much aware of his balls. So before I wrap up the story of cynicism and Diogenes, we have some new slang for you right after this.
There are a lot of fascinating and sometimes dark origins of words and phrases floating around out there. This is the segment where we ask the question, can you trust it? Today's phrase, Saved by the Bell, has a potentially very macabre origin related to being buried alive. Back in the proverbial day, being buried alive was a real fear. Consider the following deathbed request from George Washington. Have me decently buried, but do not let my body be put into a vault in less than 2 days after I'm dead. That's what I think that dying George Washington sounds like, apparently. And Frederick Chopin's last words were, swear to make them cut me open so that I won't be buried alive. And again, he probably had a Polish accent. So the story goes that back in the day, when folks started running out of places to bury people, they would dig up the coffins, take the bones to a house, and reuse the grave. But horrifyingly, when they opened the coffins, every once in a while, they'd find scratch marks on the inside of the coffin, and they realized they had been burying people alive. So, in order to prevent this horrible fate, they began tying a string on the presumed corpse's wrist, which led up through the coffin above ground where it was tied to a bell. Someone would have to sit out in the graveyard all night and listen for the bell. Believe it or not, these devices did exist, and there's a patent for the improved burial case from 1868, which even had a glass window, so presumably you could watch to make sure your loved one's eyes didn't pop open and start ringing that bell. So can you trust it? No. Can't trust it. While being buried alive was a problem, and this device did exist, there's no record of anyone being actually saved by the bell that way, and this is not where the phrase Saved by the Bell originated. It also has nothing to do with Mr. Belding or A.C. Slater, as I once believed. The origin of the phrase comes from boxing. For more on the actual origins of Saved by the Bell, check out Origin of Species, episode 19. And until next time, be careful what you trust out there. All right, so new slang today is, well, let me set it up this way. Steve is the one who books our guests on the show, and I kind of leave that to him. He does his thing, but he'll loop me in from time to time, forward me an email or something. And in the case of Yannis Pappas, our guest today, I got a text which was to confirm that Yannis, well, I think that's what it was for, but let's just show a quick screenshot of the text here. This is what Steve sent me. Steve had sent over some details, and the Yannis sent back, okay, bet. Now, if you're not watching this on YouTube, you couldn't see it, but guess what? It just says okay, bet. I immediately knew what that meant because I have a son who says that a lot. It means, in affirmative, yes, let's do that. So for example, hey, you want to go to B-Dubs and get some wings? Bet. kind of an enthusiastic, okay, bet, or just bet, or even my son will say sometimes, big boy bet. Now, I Googled that. I think that's his own little twist that he put on it. I hadn't.
Good for him.
Yeah, I haven't heard any. I couldn't find anyone else that has said that online. But anyway, like I said, I was very familiar with the idea of saying bet because I hear it. He says it a lot. Steve, when you got that message back from Yannis, what was your thought?
My thought was that I had just aged about 50 years because I had to go to Urban Dictionary to figure out what it meant. And you were very kind, but I'll tell the whole story that I sent you a screenshot of that message and also a screenshot of the definition that I found in Urban Dictionary because I had no idea what was happening. I thought I was having a stroke, or perhaps Yannis was.
I forgot that you sent that. Yeah. Because again, I knew what it meant. And then when you sent me the Urban Dictionary, I was like, oh, he hasn't heard this one. And so let's start with a place that we frequent more often than not, which I like to go to, which is Quora. And the reason I like to go to Quora is because really it's always entertaining. Always. I don't ever go to, like, if I want to answer to something, I don't go to Quora for real, right? I listen to like our podcast or I find a better resource. But there's always something interesting. So I went to Quora, and let me just read now the first result on Quora of how did the question, by the way, that we're getting to is because we know, okay, bet, it just means affirmative. Yes, right? So that's it. But why did that become a slang word? Well, the first entry here, they say this is from Edom Online, which I'll go ahead and believe. It says all the way back to the 1590s, the word bet meant to pledge as a forfeit another who makes a similar pledge in return, which is like honestly the worst way to describe that. I wish I hadn't just said that. Anyway, it says originally in the argot of petty criminals, a word of unknown origins, which appeared about the same time. In transitive sense of, quote, lay a wager. Okay, we all know what the word bet means. The reason that I find this interesting is because the person who wrote the answer on Quora's name is Steve Bett, retired professor, VP English Spelling Society, London. Okay, I mean, I don't know if this guy's real or not, but again, there's always some weird twist with Quora. The guy's name is Steve Bett. And I'm looking up.
That sounds like a bad movie villain from like a 90s spy movie, like The Saint 2 with Val Kilmer.
Steve Bett. Right. And anyway, then there's some other ones saying, somebody named Brian Gorton, former children's nurse, saying that Bett is former children's nurse. That's what you're putting out there as your. Yeah. And he says Bett is increasingly being used as a shortened version of the common "you bet," which is in itself a shortened version of the earlier phrase "you can bet on that." Look, you bet. I was thinking about this. It is definitely now the terrain of like it's like older white guys that say "you bet" or "you betcha," right? Like even I don't say "you betcha" or "you bet," but there's a certain group that does still use that. I get emails from those guys sometimes, and I kind of like it. I kind of like hearing "you bet" or "you betcha," but like nobody under the age of 50, 45 says that. Like, do you say "you bet"? I don't think that's really a big.
I don't see that happening. But now that there's a chance now this has been a seed that's been planted, that I'll start saying that now. It's going to like reemerge. Yeah.
Well, if you notice somebody saying "you bet" or "you betcha," I guarantee it's a white male, probably from like North Carolina or something. So anyway, we get Quora out of the way. I decided to go find other places that were reputable. I found a place called slanglang.net, anything with a .net. And they said bet is a slang expression for affirming a statement. It's used as a positive reaction to things. We know that. It says bet is especially prevalent in African-American vernacular English, although it has gotten adopted by many as a slang phrase. It says it came from the 90s, popular among college campuses. mostly thanks to the growing influence of Black culture and hip hop music. So I'm like, okay, here we go again.
Yeah.
So I went right to the horse's mouth, if you will. I went to dailyrapfacts.com.
Oh,
Let's just get there. Let's just,
yeah.
this is where, I mean, like everything else, it's going to go back to rap and hip hops, right?
Yeah.
So here's what dailyrapfacts.com says. The terms, slang, and expression bet, okay bet, which is Yannis's preferred way to say it, or that's a bet, was popularized in Atlanta, Georgia, which I can see. The term bet is slang meaning okay or all right, yada, yada, yada. And then it wraps up by saying bet has been used by Octavian, Saba, Moneybag Yo, Lil Wop, speaking of the Italians, and many more rappers. So like pretty much every new slang, it comes from rap, and then it filters down to white people like my son and Yannis Pappas. And that's this week's new slang.
That was extremely informative. And the next time I feel sad, I will remember that there's somebody named Lil Wop.
Lil
and that's
Wop.
just going to make me, and maybe he'll have a rival, Lil Sauce Monkey, to come battle him for Italian rap supremacy.
Yeah. I mean, there wasn't that much to that new slang. We had to do it because it was, I mean, we got new slang from a guest that's going to be on the show. You got to do it as new slang, but there's not a lot to it. But just what brought it home was the fact that, dailyrapfacts.com. It's not just that there are rappers named Moneybag, which with 2 G's, by the way. Moneybag, bag has 2 G's. Moneybag Yo and Lil Wop. It's the fact that like I'm supposed to know who those people are. Well, I guess I'm not. I'm probably not the guy going to dailyrapfacts.com. But anyway, all right, let's keep it rolling then.
Very good. So someone that I think might appreciate dailyrapfacts.com actually would be Diogenes the Cynic. So before we wrap up with his history and the history of cynicism, I'm going to give you what I call Diogenes, I'd say his best burns.
Ooh.
This guy could make a comment. So this is from a website, millionsofmouse.com, with supposed quotes from Diogenes. So one time he was watching someone compete in an archery contest, and he decided to walk over and sit down right next to the target. And when asked why, he explained that he felt it was the only place to be safe since the archer in question was so poor.
That's pretty good. That's strong.
Was good. That was a well acted out burn.
Yeah.
When Diogenes once noticed a prostitute's son throwing rocks at the crowd, Diogenes said to him, "Careful, son, don't hit your father."
That's good. I mean, that's very strong.
Yeah. And his last burn was something that really wasn't necessarily a comment, but more of an action. He was at a feast, and certain people kept throwing all the bones to Diogenes as they would to a dog. Again, he really liked dogs.
Wow.
And embraced it so much that his response to being fed like a dog, he went up to them and urinated on them.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So Diogenes got some nice comments. Doesn't sound like someone that would be very fun to hang out with. And cynicism, I think maybe he symbolizes what can happen when you go too far with being cynical of things. Maybe you move from skepticism to cynicism. So cynicism as a philosophical movement starts out pretty nice. The values, again, find the goal of life to be happy, live in agreement with nature, be self-sufficient, deny yourself unnecessary things. But then you take someone like Diogenes and it moves into a very extreme place that maybe it started well, but just does not end in a spot that's very productive. You're not going to win over anybody by urinating on them. Period. I don't think there's a situation where you win over anyone, regardless of what it is. I think it's that kind of sums it up. Peeing on people isn't going to it's going to help. But I think that also kind of shows what can happen when you become extremely cynical, that if you assume the worst of everyone, if you assume every intention is bad, things aren't going to end well. So as Stoicism started to rise in the 3rd century BC, cynicism went away for a while, had a revival with the Roman Empire. And I could see that with an empire getting big and probably people getting a little full of themselves there. An overexpanded empire can make people cynical. I'm sure we can draw some present day analogies to that, but I won't. So cynicism went away as a movement. I think we still see it now in a lot of things that online discourse and just discourse in general. But before we wrap up on cynicism, what happened to Diogenes? So again, no one's sure exactly how he died, but here's 3 speculations that are out there. 1, he became ill from eating raw octopus. Sounds a little fancy. I don't think that's true.
Yeah, it's very specific.
And it also sounds a little kind of bougie. I don't think he would do that. That's not the guy in the street. 2, died after suffering from an infected dog bite.
Now we're talking.
Plausible.
Warm, right?
Now the 3rd one I don't think is true, but I really hope this is how he died. He died holding his breath. He held his breath so long that he died.
He sounds like listen, okay, all kidding aside, like we joke around and everything. I mean, we know the guy's name. He made a point, no one can say cynicism has never been tried. Like, because he sounds like he walked the walk and lived the life and then ended up dying. But like the fact, if he died holding his breath, it really does kind of complete the like annoying life that he had. Cause that's something that you do to like, some bratty kids, like, I'm just going to hold my breath and watch, I'm going to die. Cause I'm like throwing a tantrum.
Yeah.
If that's how he ended things, it would be kind of appropriate. Like he got tired of peeing on people and just was like, watch this, you sicken me, and just held his breath.
That would be interesting too, if that's how it ended. Like he's like, I've peed on everybody. I've peed on everyone who I could pee on. It's just time to hold my breath until I die, or else I'm going to eat that octopus over there.
Well, I'd say, real quick, that was 3 possible ways he could have died. I would like to posit a 4th, having never done any research.
Please.
That one of the people that gave him like a turkey leg and that he turned around and like peed on, beat him to death. Like that's, in my opinion, without having done any research, would be the leader in the clubhouse about how this guy died. But
that would be justice. When we do the origin of that, I think that would be the way justice would be served in that. So in the idea of cynicism, I think we both talked about, like going into this thought, I was a cynical person, and I think I am. And this actually kind of challenged me to not be cynical. I think it's good to be I don't think we should go the other way and be idealistic and believe everything you hear.
Right.
Be skeptical, question authority. Don't take what the media spoon feeds you, but resist cynicism. Don't let yourself assume the worst of other human beings, especially in a day where everyone's, the potential bad faults of everyone are highlighted. And I like how we'll discuss with Yannis Pappas here shortly, how he notices that everybody on the other side is a Nazi.
Right.
And that people don't seem to see the irony of like somehow my side is Nazi free, but the other side is lousy with Nazis.
Right.
So with that, our discussion with Yannis Pappas, host of Long Days with Yannis Pappas, and will also be appearing at the Sandman Comedy Club September 16th to 18th here in Richmond, Virginia. Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, Homer, Giannis Capo. I practiced that all day. It didn't work. Our guest continues this lineage of great Greek thinkers. He is a writer, TV host, comedian, podcaster, among many things. You can see his stand-up specials on Comedy Central on YouTube. You might know him as his characters, Mr. Panos or Marissa. He was the Paul Simon of the History of Hyenas podcast. You now find him every week on his own podcast, Long Days with Yannis Pappas. Finally, if you're in the Richmond, Virginia area, you can see him live at Sandman Comedy Club, September 16th to 18th. Yannis Pappas, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's a heavy burden to carry, to continue that tradition. But much like Greece, that lineage of very fine Greeks has fallen very far off the cliff with me.
We don't think so. And just to let you know, too, my brother-in-law is Greek, but we're still glad that you're here with us today.
Okay. Well, that's good to know that your sister married him. Is that your sister?
My wife's sister.
Oh, your wife's sister.
Yeah.
All right. So her husband is Greek.
Yes.
All right.
So, but we still are glad to have you here.
And you know how he refers to him?
The Greek.
The Greek, yeah.
No.
That's what it is. Yeah, there's so few Greeks in the country that people usually have one Greek person they know, and they refer to them always as the Greek. That's how it goes. Yeah.
That's how life goes here.
Most people don't even know we're still around. They think we're just like from history or something.
No, we've had good connections with the Greeks. We actually grown up in Virginia Beach, the big tourist area, and a lot of you get a lot of people freshly immigrated would own something, own a restaurant down on the ocean front. And I think the first person I ever heard use the N-word that wasn't like in a rap video was a Greek guy. So you guys have that going for you too.
Yeah. Yeah. Greeks,
Hey, it is what it is.
It is what it is. Greeks only like Greeks, and they weren't even probably referring to a black person. They were probably referring to an Italian.
It was actually Charles Barkley.
Oh,
I remember that. You remember when Charles Barkley was the bad NBA guy?
Yes, I'm not a role model. Yeah,
ridiculous now to think about. But there was a guy that owned a fudge shop on the ocean front and had some very strong views about Charles Barkley, that he shared with me. But no judgment. You can tell by looking at the two of us, we got all sorts of Caucasian in us. So there's people in our lives that have uttered that word, I'm sure, before.
By the way, if you get a chance for some Virginia Beach fudge, you don't want to miss out on that. Forget the taffy, it's the fudge.
It's not a euphemism. You don't have to say that in an alley or anything.
Right.
Actual fudge.
I'm looking forward to it. I am looking forward to it.
So Yannis, your podcast is called Long Days with Yannis Pappas. What does it mean when Yannis Pappas is going to have a long day?
It means I'm usually going to rant about something ad nauseum that is driving me crazy, driving me mad. So that's what the podcast is, really, is it's sort of like a crazy daily show where every week I kind of recap trending topics in the culture, a few news stories that caught my eye, and I just go berserk with it. That's basically it.
But very entertaining. You made it sound like it's not like the Daily Show where you get lectured. It's more ranty in a good way. I enjoy it.
I try to find ways to make fun of all sides, all people, all the time. So it's not a left show. It's not a right show. It's a comedy show. I never understood why comedians nowadays seem to pander to one side, not the other. Why would you want to give away 50%, of the people who would enjoy you? So, and why would you take away 50% of the things you can talk about to make jokes about? So I always say I'm not Republican or a Democrat. I'm a comedian. So that's what I do.
I like that. And one of the things we say in our show is if you voted for the 70-year-old white guy who puts kids in cages, or if you voted for the 70-year-old white guy that puts kids in cages, we want you to listen to our show, regardless of which old white guy that you voted for that puts kids in cages. We want you to be here.
Right.
So the theme of our show today is cynicism. And one of the things I enjoy about you is like your life experience outside of being a comedian. So you, prior to being a comedian, you were a social worker. How did this affect your view of the world? And, were you able to come out of this experience without being cynical?
No, but I was also, I also learned a lot. It was a little bit of both. Mm-hmm. All right. So it's like, it made me cynical in that you realize you can't really fix anything. You can't fix anything. It's ongoing, and you can only sort of maintain it, maintenance it, and pass it on to the next person until they get burnt out. But it also made me optimistic in that it taught me that you have to have empathy and understand that most people don't choose to be homeless or mentally ill. They come from an environment or a family that that wasn't conducive for mental health, etc., or they had something, that they were wired to go, something that was wired to go wrong just in their genetics. So I think if everyone did social work like as a college credit, I think there'd just be a lot more empathy and understanding in the world, because you really do learn that lesson that we're all kind of one or two paychecks, most of us, or one or two family members, one or two less safety nets or support systems away from being homeless, So that's what I learned. Both ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think as you get older too, I mean, you start realizing, the guy on the corner, at least when I was 23, I was like maybe inwardly thinking, get a job. And then you get older and you're like, I mean, it's not that far out of the realm of possibility, that I could be there. So a couple things go wrong, a couple more things go wrong, I could be that guy. So for people that don't have the opportunity to be a social worker, what's the closest thing? Do you have any ideas for like how people can kind of get that perspective, or does everybody literally need to go be a social worker for a couple of years?
No, yeah. I mean, it would help. I really believe that would be a great thing for like a college credit, some type of service position. But no, I think you can challenge yourself to kind of put yourself in other people's shoes. I don't know how exactly to do that, except for just to challenge yourself when you read certain things or you have a perspective of certain things, to kind of take a moment and question why you have that perspective. Why do you view things that way? And try to put yourself in the other person's shoes. I think that's the height of wisdom, is when you can have empathy and put yourself in somebody else's shoes. Most people, most people are it's just tribal. It's like when you meet somebody who's Republican, usually their family's Republican, usually they're from a Republican area. Same thing with, when you meet somebody who's progressive or Democrat, they live in that area. Their friends are that, their parents were that. I think it speaks less to what the actual truth is, what the best system is, and more to that old, tribal nature that we have from when we, first became bipedal. We first started walking upright. We looked for our tribe, and we're still doing the same shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it is one of the cool things about guys like you that are doing podcasts that we'll talk about anything. I think that helps, actually, right? Because you're getting a little bit out of an echo chamber. Because if you're tribal, we're tribal, it's easy to listen to the echo chamber. So guys like you that are open to talking about anything, I think is actually pretty important and really funny.
Yeah, and it doesn't get rewarded too much by the algorithm. The algorithm doesn't help. Right. The algorithm is reinforcing those echo chambers and trying to suggest things to you that are, deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole, more and more extreme. So, and people are starting to act like robots in their opinions because they're being conditioned by robots. So it's
literally right.
Obvious to see why people have been pulled apart so far. It's because they're being literally conditioned like Pavlovian dogs to follow the chain of command from AI algorithms who suggest similar articles. So you just get lost in your fucking neighborhood.
Yeah. I mean, it's like we saw on, I think it was when Elon Musk was on Joe Rogan, and they were talking about how we're already kind of cyborgs in a way, right? Because we are feeding stuff to our phone and our computer that's going to big data that is then getting spit back to us. So we're already in this loop. Like, so robots are already kind of, not I won't say in control, but
we're cyborgs. We have a piece of technology stuck to our hand 23 hours of the day, or when we're asleep, it's right next to the bed.
It's true. It really is true. It's just it's an extension of you now. I mean, you know, the only difference, the only way it can go further is if they implant it in you, which they'll do soon, you know, and then we will truly be cyborgs. But yeah, I mean, you can't go a day without your phone. I mean, you can't even take a shit without your phone.
No.
Yeah.
I saw somebody called it a 90s shit. Was that you? Somebody said, I'm taking one of those 90s shits.
I didn't say that, but I do have a joke about that. That was on my half hour on Comedy Central about, like, you know, trying to go to the bathroom without your phone and how we've rendered the emotion of boredom out of existence. Like, you know, boredom used to be a thing where you'd sit around and there was absolutely nothing to do. Now, like, you feel like an inkling of boredom coming on. You just take out your phone and start doing something and it's gone. So boredom is like a human emotion that's been erased by technology, by the amenities of modernity.
Very good lead up. So that is a subject you often discuss, the amenities of modernity. And I think based on what we've discussed here, we all kind of agree that the cultural discourse right now is not necessarily good, I think, to put it lightly. So when you talk about the amenities of modernity, what do you mean, and how do you think this affects our current culture?
It's we're so disconnected from nature because of the amenities of modernity. You know, we're like what, the second or third generation to live with any level of comfort whatsoever. You know, it was like first the Industrial Revolution was like the first massive leap forward where people started having machines and big buildings and, you know, elevators and electricity and cars started coming around and planes started coming around. That was like the first big leap, and that was the turn of the last century. And that upped the level of the amenities of modernity. And then now with technology, I mean, the level of convenience, the level of comfort, you know, has spoiled us to the point where anything that makes us the slightest bit uncomfortable, we want to just deny it right away. And it just feels very uncomfortable, whether it be 1 degree off on your Google Nest, or if your Uber Eats is 3 minutes late, or, you know, I mean, we don't even make eye contact with the delivery guy anymore. You know, it's like part of that's COVID, but even before that, everything was paid for. You just open the door, pull the food in. Computers, everything is so convenient. Ubers, I mean, you don't even have to hail a cab. You don't even have to hail a cab. So you don't even have to lift your arm to communicate to another person that you need a lift. You don't have to talk to anyone. It just shows up at your door the way that only used to be reserved for, like, you know, Donald Trump and like other billionaires who would have their own. We all have our own chauffeurs, basically. We all have our own limousine services. So it's disconnected people from nature and made them spoiled. And I think that's why the conversation has gotten so rancorous, because if anyone says one thing that you disagree with, that is equivalent to your Google Nest being 1 degree off. You flip out. You absolutely flip out because it threatens your comfort, your worldview. And that's how the amenities of modernity, that's the real dark side to all this technology, is we've become these little pods of spoiled flesh that just walk around and want things done instantaneously.
I want you to know that when the DoorDash guy comes, I make sure I make eye contact with him. And I generally don't have pants on either. Like, I try to make it an experience for everybody. Like, I want this to be memorable. This isn't just you dropping off Taco Bell. This is something that's going to really, I'm kidding. I don't ever order.
No, I try to answer the door naked with just a sock over my dick like Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
I like it, man. And someone will get that reference too. That'll be good. You can get a good 90s reference for your DoorDash guy.
There you go.
I tell you, this hit home for me recently. I was just digging around. My dad's done a good job of like building out like ancestry.com for our family. And I went on my mom's side, and I am just a few generations. My great grandfather was born in Belgium, and I found a census thing that he had filled out, and they asked war on it. And it was from 1930, and he listed WW. He listed World War. And I had just a couple like moments of realizing, one, that he had fought in World War I. Also, two, that it was World War at that point. You know, he didn't realize what was going to happen just a few years down the road. And also, comparing my problems to whatever that man went through of like, you know, what was your thing today? Well, my DoorDash guy didn't like when I didn't have pants on, or like my internet was slow or something like that. Just what we've lost. I mean, not less than 100 years, you know, we've progressed to the sense that if we don't have our cyborg arm or phone with us, that our lives are going to fall apart, and we're going to get on Twitter and tell everybody about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you could just tell by how much later people are having kids, and, you know, it's at this point, at this pace, it's like they're going to have to figure out a way for 60 and 70-year-old women to get pregnant, because we live in an era where nobody wants to have kids because they don't want kids to fuck up their life, which is, it used to be you would have kids so the next generation would have a better life. You know, it's like you were obeying the instinct to reproduce. Now people are like, whoa, I have it so good, I don't want to take on any responsibility right now, so I can't have kids. I don't want this to ruin my dream, whatever shitty dream you have.
Well, you're a little bit like me in that I have one daughter, and I didn't have her till I was older. And it was one of those things that I realized, like, the veil was removed for me. Like, once you have your own kid, it's like you kind of get when your parents or other people tell you, you'll understand when you have a kid, and you go like, yeah, I'll understand. I'll have this child. I'll like it. My life will be different. But just to have almost like the blinders removed once you finally have a kid, and to see how much, me wishing my daughter's wonderful. And I just wonder how different my life would have been if it had been 10 years before when I had her. Yeah.
I mean, I'm late to the game too. I'm in my 40s. I had my first kid, and it definitely does take it does put things into perspective. And when I talk to somebody now who doesn't have a kid, I'm just like, they're talking about like their dreams, their goals, what they want to do, these big lofty. I was talking to this one woman lately. I think she's like 40 or whatever, no kids. And she was like, yeah, I gotta, women in healthcare, women in health, I gotta create something. And I was just like, I started to tune her out, and I was like, it's so obvious that you just don't have a kid. You just don't have a kid. Like, you're just you're just replacing having a kid with all types of stupid ideas.
Yeah.
How many fur babies did she have?
She probably had a bunch. Yeah, who knows? And those are the people who are online now. The people who have all the time online to argue all day about stuff are ones who don't have kids. They're not taking care of other human beings, So it's like, that's another symptom, a little more indirectly of how comfortable we become.
Yeah. So related to that, we kind of have a theme with our show that we don't think we're as far apart politically as the media and social media makes us believe. So as someone who tours across the country, but also will engage with people on Twitter, and you will get in there in the comments on things, and when you're living on the gram, what's your take is, you think we're as divided as media and social media makes us?
No, I agree with you. I don't think we are. And I think that's what's lacking is people don't put themselves in other people's shoes. I have this joke about like gun control, how I'm pro gun and gun control. It's like, if you live in New York City, if everybody had a gun on the train in the morning and, an argument broke out, it would end like a Quentin Tarantino movie. Everyone's just pulling out, it's like, but you live in an area where the cops show up at your house literally in 10 seconds. But if you live in the suburbs or the country, and it takes the cops, one of those areas where there's like 3 cops and the state police take over after a certain hour and they got to drive from whatever highway. It's like, yeah, you need a gun. You need a gun. So it's like, it's all relative. That's why those people tend to be more pro-gun, and people in the city tend to be more pro-gun control. It's because of the environment. As soon as one of those people from the city moves out to the country, they're going to want to buy a gun, not just for protection, but in case a fucking bear tries to eat your dog, you got to shoot up in the air to get the fucking bear away. You can't go, oh, I'm a liberal. I'm just got to let it eat my dog. So it's like people just have stopped considering the other side's perspective. It's like, not everyone lives like you. There's a different, you really think half the country's crazy and stupid? Like, you really think that that your image of like a right-wing voter is someone with 2 teeth who's a white supremacist is going like, like everyone's like Leatherface, like, whoa, like you fucking get off the plane and they drag you by a pickup truck and, they got a fucking shrine to Donald Trump or whatever. I mean, it's like, it's become very cartoonish how we view each other. And the other way too, it's like every right-wing person thinks a left-wing person is, sitting in, worshiping at the altar of Urban Outfitters and walking around going, I'm triggered. That's not true either. It's like those are the loudest voices because they're the craziest ones. Algorithm rewards them. And people are living in their phones and they really have developed a cartoonish, childlike view of the world with good guys and bad guys. Isn't it weird that all the Nazis are in the other party?
Yeah.
Isn't it weird that all the bad people are on the other side and all the good people are on your side? It's kind of weird. Yeah, it didn't used to be like that. Like my dad was a Republican. I have a joke. My dad was a Republican because he owned a business, and my mom was a Democrat because she lived off of him, And that's the way it used to be. They used to have both of them in your same fucking household because everyone was in the middle and leaned left or leaned right. Now it's like people are like on tug-of-war sides trying to kill each other. It's crazy. We attack our own country more. We got fucking China sending manipulated pathogens here, and we're fucking attacking each other. We can't even unify to fight a common enemy anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. It's like you used to actually live in a neighborhood before you could get on and get with your tribe. And so you had to maybe there was a hippie in your, a super left group in your neighborhood or super right or whatever. There was more of an actual diversity then, I think, before you could now you can go find your tribe online and not have to leave your house. Or you really don't have to interact with your community anymore.
Well, what I've noticed with tribes is I know people that I know their Facebook persona versus when I see them at the store buying milk. And, something about there's some sort of like, detachment that goes on with social media that it's kind of like when you drive and you get angry when you're driving, I don't know about you, like the way I drive and things that come out of my mouth when I'm driving down the street are a little bit different than if we're in person. And it's almost like that sort of thing, road rage online. If people will just say stuff and then I see them, at the barbecue and it's like, you're not, where's your MAGA hat? Where's your spray paint? And
where's your pussy hat? Yeah.
Yeah. That's it too. They need to bring that back. That did go away pretty quick, but maybe
that did. Yeah, that did go away.
Could be a Marissa thing. Maybe she could bring that back. But
it's just funny that all those people were making fun of MAGA hats. At least they were wearing a baseball cap. You were wearing a pussy on your head. That's how crazy we've gotten. Is like, imagine your cousin came over your house with a pussy hat. You'd be like, did they let him out of the mental institution? Yeah. Everybody's like, no. That's just his cause. He's voting for Hillary. You're like, okay, we've lost our fucking mind. The people who are voting for the left are wearing pussy hats, and the other ones are wearing fucking mesh baseball hats like they're fucking little league coaches. I mean, we are out of fucking control. I mean, we got AOC, we got Marjorie Taylor Greene. I mean, democracy is really fucking spinning out of control.
But it is interesting too how like so you named 2 people that are like lightning rods, I think, on both sides, and they're both congressmen who can't do anything. But if you go to Fox News or you go to CNN right now, probably both those guys are featured, or ladies, pardon me, or whatever they identify with this week, or getting the clicks, getting the hate clicks on there.
Well, yeah. Well, Gavin Newsom said recently that the reason nobody in California is getting vaccinated is because of Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tucker Carlson. It's like, that didn't really match up with the demo of like people that aren't getting vaccinated, but okay. I mean, that's who's going to call them out, I guess, but just say Marjorie Taylor Greene. Nobody knows who Marjorie Taylor Greene is. I mean, unless you're on Twitter. That's
the media, dude. The media online didn't adapt. They didn't adapt to the digital age. So it's like, as soon as they started giving away news for free and didn't train people to subscribe from the giddy up, it's like doing a free comedy show. The audience is going to be shit. They're half paying attention. They're walking in, they're walking out. So what you got to do to get their attention is go be more and more outrageous in your headline and your content, more editorialized, because fiction and rage and all that stuff it's the reason why, you know, we rubberneck when we see a car accident. It's like everyone wants to look. So the media has basically turned us into just rubberneckers for clicks in order for them to sell their, like, you know, their embedded ads on their dumb site, because it's a free article. And they all got Twitter accounts now. So they're personally trying to get famous. They're, you know, it's like, you know, try tweeting something nuanced and well thought out and see how many retweets you get. Or if you just tweet AOC's a bitch, or Marjorie Taylor Greene is a monster, or Hillary Clinton's a shapeshifter, it's just a lot funner. It's just a lot funner, and people retweet it more, and then the algorithm rewards that. So we're really in this death spiral right now of just, we used to say on my old podcast, History Hyenas, that reality has become a suggestion. It's just, reality is a suggestion. Nobody knows what the truth is. Nobody wants to admit what their biological sex is. No, and people are pretending, you know, there's a couple people who've changed their race and are living as those people. Like we're living in like an absolute impressionist painting with no form. And it's just, we're just Justin Pollock or whatever his fucking name is, just throwing paint against the wall, and we're just calling it art. And you know, it's like, hey, I could do that too. I mean, I like the colors, Jason Pollock, but my kid could have thrown the fucking paint on the fucking canvas.
So true. By the way, speaking of changing your race, I did happen to see today that Rachel Dolezal has an OnlyFans now. So I think it was, but then it was the same day that
they just
OnlyFans
announced
is no longer going to allow boobies. So I don't know if that was a coincidence or what's going on.
Maybe that was what it took. It was like, we can't have a fake racial person on here showing their butt, so we got to shut it down.
One of her options was to show her feet. You know, it's hard to satirize the state of things, because the comedy is just reality now. I mean, it's like, this is a woman who was the NAACP chapter head on the West Coast, who was a white woman, like a very white woman too. She wasn't like, you know, if I saw Steve pretending like he was Hispanic, he could go his whole life and probably get away with it. Or maybe even Asian. I mean, kid looks Mongolian or whatever. He can get away with it. I mean, Rachel Dolezal, when you look at those high school, I mean, she looks like an Amish woman. She looks like a Mennonite. I mean, she looks fucking Scandinavian white. And somehow she was able to pretend like she was black for like 20 years and rise all the way up in the black activist scene. You got to give credit where credit's due, man. And here's the thing. She was able to get away with it because she's got a fat ass. It's like the movie Catch Me If You Can, when Leonardo DiCaprio's father says the Yankees always win because they can't see past the pinstripes. Yeah. Well, with black dudes, if you got a fat ass, they don't, your race, they just might not notice, because they just get locked in on the fat ass, and you could pretend to be black and get away with it because those are the Yankee pinstripes for them.
We grew up in Virginia Beach, so we can vouch for that.
We can empathize. We still do have the neck cranes for us. We have to fight against our raising. So speaking of people that are claiming one race and not being, I know that you are a fan of the great race grifter Sean King, who also is biologically Caucasian, but is chosen to identify as black. And unlike Rachel Dolezal, who I think doesn't get enough credit for actually being an activist and doing something, not like, you know, being a scam artist, Sean King has faked his race and also made a lot of money off it. But Denny politics makes me cynical, but I also want to see what I can do to take advantage of it. So, Scott, I don't want you to think I'm excluding you from this on purpose, but if I told Yannis that you came from a long line of Irish lumberjacks, he would agree immediately. They're like, there's no way to fake it with you, but
with a thyroid problem. But yeah.
Well, I wasn't going to say that out loud, but I'm kind of like, so Yannis, I need your insight on this. So I know you're biased towards Northern Europeans, no judgment, but I'm kind of like a honky Voltron, but I do have some sort of beige thing going on. So I'm quarter Irish, quarter German, quarter Swedish, but I think my big wild card is Belgian, quarter Belgian. So that's why I look like a half Filipino lesbian. Is I think it's the Belgian that kind of, you know, puts that spark in me that makes it look like I want typhoon food and a Subaru. But what I want to do is what can you do to help me become the Belgian Sean King? Do you have any recommendations or just thoughts on how I can exploit our current identity politic obsession?
I mean, the only problem is Belgians don't need anything. They've never been oppressed. Belgians are doing pretty good. What you can do is, and you probably wouldn't be grifting that much, because at some point I would guess Genghis Khan fucked one of your ancestors. Yeah. You got one of those. I mean, the kid had like 3 billion kids. He was like, he fucked everything. And the conquest, I mean, if you look at his path of conquest, he was everywhere.
Okay.
And he was a marauder, and he fucked. I mean, how many kids did Genghis Khan have? You're a descent. Obviously, Genghis Khan raped a white woman somewhere in the Belgian area, and you have Genghis Khan's genes, so you could lean into that and become a spokesperson for the underserved Mongolian community in America.
I like that. And I like too that if like someone like in my HR department starts pushing back and say, let me tell you a little bit about my history of how, Genghis Khan raped all the Belgians, and just that conversation should get them to shut up.
Yeah.
All right. You're the Greek wisdom continues.
That was amazing. That was amazing on the spot. It's wow.
What's funny is like, that's how cool Black people are. Like when you look at their culture, you look at their music and everything, that other ethnic groups in this country have started culturally appropriating their struggle. It's like everyone, it's like you're Asian or you're Indian or whatever. And they're like, we got to do away with this straight white patriarchy that, accepted my parents and grandparents in after they fled the oppression from the people that look exactly like me, and they came here and they welcomed me with open arms. And in one generation, my parents became business owners and I'm an engineer, but we got to do away with this patriarchy in this horribly oppressive country. By the way, somebody has to warn these Afghani refugees that they are coming to a straight white male patriarchy, and some of them may not get equal pay if you're a woman, if you come here. So they may want to think twice and stay in Afghanistan. Well, at least they can be all the same subjugated, because at least that's equal. At least they can have some sort of equality there, which is coveted by a lot of people. So, just be careful when you come here, Afghani refugees, because there is a wage gap.
They might not get true equity like everyone who's hiding in a basement right now in Afghanistan.
That's how cool Black people are, that these groups have like culturally appropriated their struggle. It's like, you hear Asians, I'm like, and then you look it up, you're like, wait a second, Asians are the most successful ethnicity in the country. You guys are on average making much more money than straight white people. Where is the oppression? Yeah. And they're like, shut up.
It's our strong Mongolian genes that have made us so successful.
But that's everybody has those.
I love the college admission controversy, because that's always interesting, because it's Asians who are being discriminated against because they're being replaced. And it's a hard one for the Asians because, like, the certain woke ones, because they're giving up the Asian spots to try to give to, either African-American, Hispanic. So it's like, that's a tough one to pin on whitey. You know what I mean? When it's like, because the Asians dominate. I mean, the Ivy League admissions is their NBA. They dominate it. I mean, it's like dominated. And of course, schools are trying to diversify, and Asians feel like they're being discriminated against for being so smart. And they are. But then if you're a woke Asian, you're going like, okay, which side of the argument are you? Are you for your people, or are like, what are you going to do? And their heads explode because they just can't deal with that issue.
I think you have the name of your next comedy special, Woke Asian.
That's woke Asian. Yeah.
Or that's going to be mine. I'm going to have to take that now.
Woke Mongolian.
Now that I'm Mongolian with that. Yeah. So, Yannis, you've been granted Zeus-like power to fix our country. After you take vengeance on the Ottomans, what does Yannis the Great do?
Yeah, that's every Greek's Achilles heel. We can be as reasonable as we want, but when it comes to the Ottomans, we want to see heads cut off.
Yeah, well, you get that power.
We want retribution. They enslaved us for 400 fucking years. A lot of people don't know that. So when people say, hey, you're Islamophobic, it's like, hey, dude, all right, my people were conquered and raped by them for 400 years. Can I have this moment? So what's your question? What would I do?
How do you fix America?
The first thing I would do is very simple. I would, instead of all these social media companies policing what people say, which I think only fosters conspiracy theories and is a violation of the First Amendment in a lot of ways, which is why I think the government does need to regulate social media companies, just like the government had to regulate railroads at a certain point because they just had too much power and they were doing too much. This is more dangerous than railroads in a way because these tech barons, they're basically tech barons. Like in the Industrial Revolution, there were railroad barons. And again, that was the first big revolution. And now we have the tech revolution. So, the Jeff Bezoses, the Elon Musks, what's the fucking Martian from Facebook? Him. Those guys are running the world now, like the railroad barons did. And what I would do, instead of policing the speech, I would police the fake fucking accounts.
Yeah.
Police the fake fucking accounts. I mean, it's like Russia and China and even just bored stay-at-home dads are like ripping us apart by trolling, getting in there, sparking fights. And of course, the social media companies don't do anything about it because they love the inflated engagement. They love the inflated membership. That looks good for their stock price. So when
you're thinking like a purge, because I remember like a while back, Twitter did some sort of, hey, we just purged 1 billion fake accounts. Or are you thinking like more of an authentication that you're a human being? More
of an authentication that you're a human being and you are who you say you are, and you're only allowed one account. And if you're allowed another account, you have to go through some loops. Like if I have an account for a character, it's like registered to me. They know it's me. It's my character. It's a parody account. Like it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. It just imagine that. Imagine in the real world if people could just walk around and just pretend to be somebody else. And just trick you all the time. I mean, that's fraud, right? That's fraud in the real world. And there's consequences for that. There should be online policing of that because we have adversaries in this world that are taking advantage of that. I mean, Putin is a former KGB guy. He loves this shit. And he's been in there on both sides, stoking flames. And the Chinese are in there. And they, just recently, they were caught because they were actually they were hiding behind like a marketing company, but they were paying influencers to post all this anti-vax stuff, all this anti-vax information. And I think it was in Germany or France. One of the influencers like went to their intelligence arm and said, "Hey," and then they did research on the marketing firm, and it was like three companies away was a front for like some Russian government agency. So it's like subterfuge is the way war is fought now. It's like we can't drop bombs on each other if you're a superpower, China, Russia, because we all have nukes. So it's like mutually assured destruction. So the way war is fought now is through information and disinformation and subterfuge and maybe manipulated viruses.
Maybe. We're pro saying that. By the way, COVID's real. COVID vaccine is real. And the Wuhan flu coming from Wuhan accidentally.
Yeah, that was my favorite. Yeah. Remember, there's a South African strand. There's a Brazilian strand.
Like the United Colors of Benetton.
Yeah.
But there is no Chinese strand.
No.
That's what you couldn't say. Remember that?
Oh, yeah. Remember that.
Oh, yeah. No, I told Steve the other day I was with somebody and I was like, yeah, it's like so crazy that it's just now that people are able to say this. And he like left the room. He's like, because it was racist or something for me to say that. I'm like, what's happening? Oh, yeah. You live in Charlottesville.
Well, Matt Taibbi had a great article recently that kind of told the history of COVID, but all factual. And it goes back to the media trying to split us all up. He's like, President Trump came out, did the operation Warp Speed. Big Pharma got in there, got the vaccine out. The next president came in, continued his good work. We had these tremendously high vaccination rates. People are getting infected, but the people that are vaccinated are very low percentage. There's a very good way to spin this as a great story. But the media, in their insistence to either, big orange man's bad no matter what he does. And also, we can't have a positive story. We've got to put something out there so you can have people going, I don't like the anti-vaxxers, or the Democrats don't like the Republicans, or vice versa. It's ridiculous what's out there when we have an enemy that actually hates us that probably released this. And sorry, it's late. This is why I get to have a long day with Steve. But, looking at, I was going to say about Twitter, I do a lot of the stuff on our Twitter. In the months leading up to the election, I'd had all these followers that are, resistance, blue wave, all this stuff. Election occurs. Now, magically, all my spam followers that we get, and you can find us on Twitter at Species, are all American flags, MAGA, all this stuff. They've just switched accounts. The Russians, the Chinese, or the bots or whatever are just still trying to antagonize. It's ridiculous. We got to call it out.
Yeah, it's the media with all their articles, confusing people with headlines, and also you got to give a lot of blame to the Democratic establishment for politicizing the virus first because they hated Trump so much. There's consequences for everything. They wanted Trump out. Trump was a wild one. He was definitely a wild card. He definitely threatened China a lot. Maybe you can see a motive for why they were like, you know what, we're going to fucking release this now because you're fucking with, you're talking about fucking with our money. These are theories. I'm not saying I know anything, but if you go back and you watch clips of Cuomo, the great Hansi Cuomo, the Italian, you go back and you look at Kamala Harris talking about the vaccine. You go back, you look at Joe Biden talking about the vaccine, talking about how they will not take a vaccine from Trump's administration. They do not trust the FDA. They won't take a vaccine. I mean, it's wild. It's absolutely wild. And it's hypocritical for them to now go like, what look at these Republicans who are, being anti-vax. It's like, you were the first anti-vaxxers to serve your political purpose. You are the ones who put party in front of, your people first. You're the ones who started it. So, and now they act like saints. And again, they're the good people and the other side is the bad people, when you can clearly see that they did the same exact fucking thing. And in fact, it's worse because they did it first, because they wanted for Trump to look bad. And I wouldn't be surprised if they withheld the vaccine a little bit to get him out, they just held it like, let's wait till after the election to release the vaccine.
We have such short memories, and you hit on it earlier. We're kind of like sacks of shit now, and we are into the 24-hour news cycle as well, and we like our stories, and the media is telling stories, and we're okay with it. It's like the kayfabe thing. It's like WWE. We're just like following along, not using our brains. People like the quote Biden had about with they were asking about the how bad things went with the Afghanistan
withdrawal. Yeah.
Thank you. And he's like, that was 4 or 5 days ago. Like, why are we talking about this? And you're like, but that is actually kind of where we are. So it's when it was happening in real time. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that happened over the last 2 years that in real time we're like, this is insane. How's anybody going to get away with this? And then we kind of forget about it and we've moved on to the next thing. And we're just going to follow the narrative kind of, because it's kind of fun and we can still get our Grubhub or whatever, not to look at anybody in the eye, and then we'll just watch our stories. But we're losing the plot, and it's kind of feels like the horse is out of the barn a little bit with that. But
yeah, and I mean to piggyback on what Steve was saying, the media, there's a reason why everybody knows who Marjorie Taylor Greene is. Used to be you didn't know who your I didn't even know my own Congress people. There's a reason we know who she is. There's a reason we know who AOC is. There's a reason we know who Ilhan Omar is because the media, they're so outrageous in what they say and irresponsible in what they say that the media covers them for clicks. It's the same reason why they love to hate Donald Trump. He was so good for ratings. They loved him. They made him. I mean, the media and Hollywood made that fucking guy. I mean, he is a celebrity, dude. He doesn't own all those buildings he says he owns. He franchises his name out. He's like at least a 3% owner sometimes. He's a star. He's a star, and he boosted the ratings of every single fucking TV show in late night. He boosted SNL's ratings, and they make him a star. And they say, oh, he's so bad, he's so bad. But it's like, you keep writing about every single fucking thing he says. And of course, he's going to keep saying that shit because he knows you're going to fucking write about it. And you go to Marjorie Taylor Greene. Now, I saw one video where she's talking about going door to door and shooting. She's like, there's going to be like vaccine patrols where they come to your house, knock on the door. And she's like, you know, if they come, you just shoot them. And you're going like, and then of course I saw it in an article because they're going like, of course I am going to pick this lowest denominator fruit and put it out because it's going to get clicked. I'm going to click on it. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to click on that. I see an article about BGI, some company that was a front for the Chinese military where they were giving prenatal tests to women to collect DNA to do research on how to manipulate genetics and pathogens and create super soldiers, which was a Reuters article. Google it. It's a real fucking company, a real thing that happened. I'm not going to click on that. It's boring shit to think about a company and what they're doing. I'm going to click on Marjorie Taylor Greene talking about grabbing your gat and shoot whatever liberal knocks on your door.
Yeah. Well, and like you said earlier, it's not just boring, it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to read about this stuff. It's more fun to read about getting your gat and sticking to your tribalism, you know? So
yeah. It's just
like,
wild that we have a congresswoman who that's what she's saying, you know?
Yeah. Yannis, tell us where we can find you and where to look for you.
Thank you guys. This was a lot of fun. I mean, we went wild a little bit.
We did.
So, you know, I hope I hope everyone's okay, you know, and got through it.
What, Wing Shin Changs or something to
we need some Wei Zhong Jings, and you know, I love your bandana.
Thank you.
And they can find me, Yannis Pappas, all one word, on all social medias. Definitely listen to the podcast, Long Days with Yannis Pappas. And if you want, you can watch my latest special that I shot like a year and a half ago. It's on YouTube called Blowing the Light. So check that out, and just Google my name. You know, if you're interested, just look up me on Instagram. I mean, you know, people can find you.
Yeah. And if you're in Richmond, Virginia, at the Sandman Comedy Club, September 16th to 18th. Great new club. You're gonna be very happy. I mean, just be honest. If it was a dump, this wouldn't be the time for me to tell you, man. You need to go get some more vid to get out of that. But it's a good club. You're gonna have a good time. Great crowd. Looking forward to seeing you there. And if you see a guy that looks like an Irish lumberjack and a guy that looks like an 80s undercover cop, it might be me and Scott. So, Yannis, thank you very much. If you guys want to hear more from Yannis, he subscribe to patreon.com/Speaksies. We're going to hear Yannis answer 3 silly questions. Yannis Pappas, thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, Scott does look like he just survived the plane crash and had to eat a passenger to survive.
All right, that's our show for today. Big thanks to our guest, Yannis Pappas. Yannis will be at the Sandman Comedy Club here in Richmond, Virginia, September 16th through the 18th. And I believe Steve and I will be there on the 16th if you want to come say hi. Yeah. If you aren't already subscribed to our YouTube, please go to speaksies.com/listen and click on the YouTube link and subscribe. You can now see my pasty face and Steve's tanned face while we talk on the show. We also appreciate, and any of you who would want to send any love our way on with a review on Apple Podcasts, follow us on Spotify. But most of all, thanks so much for listening to Origin of Speaksies. We are excited to be back. We're going to have a lot of fun this season. So until next time, Bob's your uncle.
Watch out for bears, and kale is from the devil.
Speaksies.